Hello, my name is Jaume Padilla, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Nutrition and Exercise Physiology, as well as an investigator at the Dalton Cardiovascular Research Center. I obtained my PhD in clinical exercise physiology at Indiana University, and subsequently I came here to Mizzou for my postdoctoral fellowship in vascular biology in the Department of Biomedical Sciences. Our research program is focused on understanding the links between physical inactivity, obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes with cardiovascular disease. Our primary focus is the study of the molecular, structural, and physiological mechanisms underlying endothelial insulin resistance and impairments in vasomotor reactivity, a state that commonly precedes the development of arterial stiffening and vascular disease. A better understanding of the precipitating factors and mechanisms causing defects in vascular insulin actions, endothelial dysfunction, and arterial stiffening is critical for the development of novel therapeutic strategies aimed at lessening the burden of cardiovascular disease. To accomplish this, we take a multi-scale and integrative approach by incorporating biochemical and molecular experiments, studies in cell culture, studies ex vivo in isolated arteries, as well as in vivo studies in small and large animal models. We also conduct human mechanistic studies by using non-invasive imaging modalities, including Doppler and contrast-enhanced ultrasound, under a variety of experimental conditions, as well as full-fledged clinical trials to assess the impact of a drug or a lifestyle intervention. It's findings from one end of the spectrum, for example, findings from the basic science research that guide our experiments in human subjects, our clinical studies, and vice versa. Our findings from our clinical studies guide our more mechanistic experiments in cells, isolated arteries, and animals. Accordingly, our graduate students have the opportunity to get immersed and trained in a variety of techniques, models, and research questions. Our research is highly collaborative, and it's this team science approach that we have created that has been instrumental in our development and success of our research. This highly collaborative environment is also highly beneficial to our graduate students.
I'm Jaapna Dhillon. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Nutrition and Exercise Physiology. And my research areas are interdisciplinary. So I study nutrition science, ingestive behavior, health disparities, and bioinformatics. So my main research is looking at the effects of dietary interventions on cardiometabolic outcomes and the gut microbiome. And I use omics techniques to investigate how metabolites change in response to dietary interventions, so that would be metabolomics. I also use transcriptomics to see how gene expression profiles change in response to dietary interventions. My current study is looking at the effects of a personalized dietary intervention on health outcomes. So I'm studying how improvements in diet quality can beneficially improve, cardiometabolic outcomes and the diversity of the gut microbiome. So we have participants coming in and consuming fruits, vegetables, and nuts for 8 weeks straight, and they also get dietary counseling by a dietitian. And then we also have the control group that is not eating any foods, but and they're not getting counseled by the dietitian. My other area of research looks at pre-ingestive factors and how those influence appetite and food intake. So things like how sensory perceptions of foods can influence food intake, how cephalic phase responses, which are responses that are elicited even before you put something in your mouth, so the smell of food, and even just the taste of food before you consume it can induce production of specific hormones like the cephalic phase insulin response. So I study how that influences food intake in general. Now, my research generates a lot of data, and I also see how incorporating all this data into computational models can help us in predicting metabolic responses to diets. Now, lastly, I also study health disparities. So, the incidence of diet-related cardiometabolic disorders is much higher in racial and ethnic minority groups in the US. However, these groups are also very underrepresented in clinical nutrition research. So I am looking at how dietary interventions can improve health outcomes and are differentially influenced by race or ethnicity.
Hi, my name is Vicki VieiraPotter, and I am an associate professor here in NEP, and I'm also principal investigator of the FitFat Lab. So my lab group is really interested in fat cells, or adipocytes. In particular, we're interested in how estrogen and exercise affect fat cells. And the reason we're interested in that is that it turns out that fat cells are a really important predictor of systemic metabolic health. And so we're really interested in learning more about how exercise and how estrogen mechanistically affect fat cells. And in recent years, we've actually become quite interested in the brain, and the reason is that estrogen also signals in the brain, and we think that estrogen signaling pathways in the brain actually affect physical activity as well as fat cell health. So that sort of is in a nutshell what we do. I'm a basic science lab, so what that means is we use a variety of animal models, lots of transgenic models to determine kind of mechanistic relationships, and we also use cells. So we grow up little fat cells in a dish, and we manipulate those fat cells with chemicals that kind of do things that like exercise would do, as well as hormones and other factors. So I'm a basic science lab, but we are kind of merging into some translational research as well, and I'm hoping to, in the next few years, run some clinical studies where we'll be able to translate our work to the human population. So that's what I do in a nutshell. My lab has a lot of fun. That's if it's not fun, we don't do it. So that's what we do.